من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وعنده مفاتح الغيب لا يعلمها إلا هو ويعلم ما في البر والبحر وما تسقط من ورقة إلا يعلمها ولا حبة في ظلمات الأرض ولا رطب ولا يابس إلا في كتاب مبين. So after the first two lectures that served, inshallah, as an introduction and hopefully ground rules and reference points, so if we get stuck at anything, we can refer back. Now, in this lecture, inshallah, we're going to really jump into the beginnings of the topic, even though we've sort of touched upon different aspects, but this class, inshallah, this lecture will really be, we're taking a step in that direction. And this class is dedicated to answering the question, who are we? So before we talk about our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our relationship with the Quran, our relationship with the Sunnah, all of the things that we said are the focal points of Islamic spirituality. First, we have to define who we are. And this might seem academic, and that's on purpose, because as I said, we are taking an academic approach from the outside about the subject matter, so that inshallah in our personal lives, if we seek to advance this, we will have a reference point. So we begin by defining who we are. Obviously, we all have a physical body. So what does Islam say about our physical body? When the ulama came to interpret matter and interpret the world around them, they said that there is a body, a physical body, that is an indivisible, we could use the word maybe even atom, that is the smallest indivisible unit of matter. And they call that unit al-jawhar. So we're going to be a little technical here. For the next few minutes, we're going to be taking pages from the books of logic and the books of theology. That when we look out and we see the world of things around us, we see that there is a body, there is an amalgamation of matter, and it has a defined physical aspect to it. But in addition to that, there are things in the observable world, there are things in the physical world that we see that do not have physical dimension, but they are related to that body. And those things are called the accidents that can befall objects. Now you might think, well, what does this have to do with Islamic spirituality? Well, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to why that's very important. So the ulama, they said everything that we see and that we can touch, including ourselves, this matter is a manifestation of the jawhar. It's just the jawhar that is amalgamated, different atoms have been put together. Let's just use the word atom because everyone can understand that. And it's put together such that we have a mass in front of us. That's what we all are when we say that we are body. Now, we're not just body. That's the point of the lecture. We're not just the body. But it's important that we understand what we think about that body. But then in the body, everyone has their own skin complexion. We have a certain size. We have a certain mass. We can own things, we can act upon things can be acted upon. There are 9 of these categories, and all of this comes from the logic of Aristotle. And to make it simple, the ulama put them in 2 lines of poetry so we can remember them. And they say, زَيْدُ الطَّوِيلُ الْأَزْرَقُ بْنِ مَالِكِ فِي بَيْتِهِ بِالْأَمْسِ كَانَ مُتَّكِي بِيَدِهِ غُصْنُ نَوَاهُ فَالْتَوَى فَهَذِهِ عَشْرُ مَقُولَاتٍ سِرٍ. So they said Zayd is like Joe in the Arabic language. So Zayd is the average name. Zayd, the tall one, is blue. You have to have a color. He's blue in this poem. The son of Malik is in his house yesterday, reclining. In his hand was a stick. He bent it. It was bent. These are the 10 categories. So what are these 10 categories? What do they mean? And then why are they important? So Zayd is the substance, is the jawhar. It's the mass. And then these are the 9 accidents, the 9 extra things that you can define mass with. So Zayd is tall, this is quantity. Zayd is blue, this is quality. Zayd is the son of Malik, so there's a relationship. He was in his house, there is somewhere. Yesterday, there is some time. Lying or reclining, he is in position. In his hand, so there's ownership. Having is a stick, he bent it, action, and the stick was bent, reaction. So these are the 10 accidents by which we define matter. Now, why this is important? Well, first of all, it's part of how we understand Islam. So that's, at least you've heard it and you have a reference point. You can come back. And the reason the ulama put it in these 2 lines of poetry is so that people will remember. But the reason it's important for our discussion is for 2 things. Number 1, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala laysa kamithlihi shay. Allah is not like anything. So you can't define Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a body, having mass, having quantity, having quality, having direction, having play. Allah ta'ala is beyond all of that. Laysa kamithlihi shay. And that's going to be very important because one of the things we focus on in discussing Islamic spirituality or tasawwuf is our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and invoking Allah by His divine name. So we need to remember, laysa kamithlihi shay. So these things define us and define matter, but they can't define Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the second reason they're important is that when we say there is matter and there is substance and that there are these type of accidents or qualities that can happen, these categories that can happen to matter, one of our beliefs is also that these qualities do not transfer from substance to substance. So when I get up to move, it's not that my mass, my quality, my quantity have transferred to another body that becomes me standing. But rather, the qualities, these 9 categories, are stuck to the substance. And how we see life unfold in front of us is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates at every moment. Kun fayakun, kun fayakun, kun fayakun. Be and it is. Be and it is. And this is one of the quintessential cornerstones of Islamic theology. Some people refer to it as the atomic theory of Islam. That at each micro moment, at each atomic moment, there is creation. That Allah Ta'ala is allowing each moment to connect to each moment. So if I move my hand like this, it is not that the color of my hand, the shape of my hand, the size of my hand has transferred to other atoms. But rather these 9 categories, like these descriptions of this generic figure Zayd, are all stuck with him. He's always going to be blue. He's always going to be tall. He's always going to be the son of Malik. So when Zayd moves, like at the end of the poem, he has the stick and he bends it and it's bent. Allah Ta'ala creates at each moment those atomic actions and then links them together. Now were Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala not to create and were Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala not allow us to be, what would we be? Would we be dead? We would be beyond dead, because if somebody is dead, there's still a body. There's still a body that has size, that has color, etc. If Allah Ta'ala has left us for a moment without creating at every moment, we would cease to exist. It would be a form of fana. It would be a form of annihilation. We would be annihilated. And this word fana is very important because it comes back later when we talk about the stages of one's relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah Ta'ala allows this body and these 9 categories to be described this body at every single atomic moment. So all we see around us is nothing but a series of stills that have been connected at every micro moment by Allah Ta'ala creating, kun fayakun, kun fayakun, kun fayakun. And because they're all next to each other, we see life as one seamless motion. But in reality, from a theological point of view, it's not. It is at every moment Allah Ta'ala is creating. This is very, very significant because, first of all, this is part of our belief system. You know, when we say La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, or when we say La ilaha illallah, whatever the case may be, this is part of what we mean when we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we need to know this as far as our general education. But it's also significant because it's very opposite the post-enlightenment way of talking about God. That God created and sort of just let creation be. It helps us understand the difference between free will, predetermination, destiny, all of those things, which we're not going to talk about now. But this idea of how we judge the world around us and how we measure things and how we talk about them is very, very important. And it also reminds us that all of our disciplines all serve each other. So here we are to talk about tasawwuf, but we end up talking about theology, then we talk about the categories of Aristotle, and we talk about logic. It's all the same. All of these things go into explaining the Quran and the Sunnah. So when we say we are body, let us remember some of these lessons of the body. But everything that we see has a body. And we clearly are different than the chair. We clearly are different than animals. We are clearly different than the tree. There's something different or special about the human being that is not in other bodies. So there's more than just simply the physical body, of course, and we all understand that. There is something else called the soul, ruh. And that's a second component that we are made of. That inside this body is something called the soul. And Allah Ta'ala says, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ. They ask you about the soul, but we don't know much about the soul. وَمَا أُوتِيتُ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا, but you've only been given a little bit of knowledge. So we don't know much about the soul, other than the soul is like a battery that gives the body motion, that gives the body life. A moment ago, we mentioned what happens if we die. Well, when we die, the soul has been removed from the body, so there is no more life. If the soul comes back in the body, if the soul leaves the body and then comes back in the body, that's sleep. And that's what Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran. It's tied to the body. We don't know how exactly, but you can think of it as a very light type of substance. It's a substance. We might not be able to see it, but it's a substance nonetheless. And it's somehow tied or tethered to the physical body. So when we sleep, the soul kind of is able to move about. This is when we have dreams and we experience things in our sleep. But then when we wake up, the soul comes back to the body. If the soul leaves and doesn't come back, we are dead. Which is why death for us is not the end of life. Because Allah Ta'ala has still allowed that when somebody dies, we wash the body, right? There's still a body, you can feel the body. And then you have to carry the body, and you have to shroud the body, and we pray the janazah on the body, then we take the body to the cemetery, and we bury it, and we get in the grave, and we put it down, and we do the talqeen. The body is still there. It just happens that the soul is not attached to the body at that moment, but there is still life with a capital L, because Allah Ta'ala is still allowing the kun fayakun, kun fayakun. So this is very important, so we understand other aspects of our faith as well. We don't know much about the soul, is the upshot. But still, if we look at ourselves with other created beings are also physical body and a soul. So when you see animals, deer around here running around, there's a body and there's a soul, because the soul is what's placed in the body that activates the body, that allows it to move about. But we would clearly say that we are different than the animals still. Okay, we understand the body, we understand the soul, but still we are different than the other things, the other beings. So there is something third. In my lectures, we will call it the self and nafs. And the reason I say it that way is, as we will see shortly, one of the difficulties in talking about this subject matter is that different ulama use different words for some of these things. From today moving forward, we are going to talk about body, soul, and self. I will explain that, and we will come back to the terminology momentarily. But just remember that we are talking to make things clear. Again, we are looking at the academic playing field of this subject matter. We are looking at body, soul, and self. The self inside the human being is the rational entity. It is what allows us to understand. It is what gives us free will. It is our intellect, or it is our heart. Allah Ta'ala refers to it in the Quran sometimes as the heart. He says, for example, in Surah Al-A'raf, verse 179, لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ بِهَا. They have hearts they do not understand with their hearts. So here Allah is saying that the heart has fiqh, has knowledge. In Surah Al-Mujadila, verse 22, كَتَبَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمُ الْإِيمَانِ. Allah has written faith in their hearts. In Surah Al-Shu'ara, نزل به الروح الأمين على قلبك, that Allah Ta'ala has revealed the Quran to the heart of the Prophet ﷺ through Gabriel. Elsewhere in the Quran, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَى قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. Do they not reflect and think about the Quran, or are there locks on their hearts? So in these verses and others, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala refers to our intellect as the heart. So what makes us different from other substances, and what makes us different from substances that have souls, is that we have this intellect. For the purposes of our lectures, we will refer to it as the self, the nafs, which is also how Allah Ta'ala refers to it in the Quran, and very shortly you'll see why. When Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala addresses humanity through revelation, whether it be through the revelation of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, or the revelations before us, you can think of it that Allah Ta'ala is addressing the self, is addressing the intellect, the rational capacity of the human being to hear, understand, reflect, deduce, tie together, is what makes us the human being. What makes us technically, in the language of Islam, morally responsible, which is called taklif. So we have taklif, we are morally responsible. Meaning that if we do something good, inshallah, Allah will reward us. And if we do something bad and we don't seek forgiveness, then we might be punished for it Yawm al-Qiyamah. We are morally responsible. We have an obligation to act a certain way. We have an obligation not to act a certain way. What is being addressed by this? It's certainly not the body, because we talked about other things have bodies. It's not the soul, because the other things have a body and the soul. It is this third issue called the self and nafs. Now the reason, we've been speaking for about 15 minutes now, the reason it's been taken so long to get to this point is that we need to understand step by step these different distinctions, because Islam and the Islamic sciences are really precise disciplines. They're not sloppy, they're very precise. Everything is demarcated, everything is explained, everything is defined. So we're gonna try to do our best, inshallah, to stick to that so we don't get lost. Now, the self, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala refers to the self using different adjectives in the Quran. So Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala will say, An-nafsul lawwama, the blameworthy self. In Surah Yusuf, An-nafsul ammara bis-su, the self that calls to bad actions. Then you will find elsewhere in the Quran, An-nafs al-mulhama, An-nafs al-radiyah, An-nafs al-murdiyah. All of these adjectives that Allah Ta'ala uses to refer to the self. So when the ulama of this discipline came to articulate all of this, they said, one of the aspects of the self, other than the fact that it is rational and it can comprehend and there's free will, is that the self can increase and can decrease. Which is why Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala says, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. Blessed is the person that has improved their nafs, and wretched is the person that has decreased their nafs. So each one of us, we can have a nafs, we can have a self that has different levels. It can either be good, lofty, saintly, pious, enlightened, or it could be bad, it could be wretched, but you're still you. You're still the same body, you're still the same soul, you're still you. But you can be different versions of yourself. The entire discipline of Islamic spirituality is precisely to help us be the best version of ourselves. And that is why the ulama of this subject spent so much time articulating what the different levels of the self are. Now, before we continue, I said that one of the challenges is the nomenclature. Because oftentimes, because we don't know much about the soul, other than the little stuff that I told you. I mean, there's a little bit of extra details, but nothing really more than what we just said. Oftentimes, the ulama will refer to the self that we're about to talk about now using the word the soul. So it can get confusing. Or they'll refer to the self and they'll talk about the heart. So the reason I emphasize again that we are looking at this academically is that we can have a structure in our mind of what the differences are between these things. And as we seek to read more, and I brought a sample for you, as we seek to read more about this specific issue, to keep in mind that some ulama use different words. But what they're talking about is the self. To make things even more difficult, the ulama have different opinions about how many levels of the self there are. So I'm going to give you one scheme of understanding the self that has 7 levels. And the reason I'm doing that is that you can read more about it in this book called The Degrees of the Soul. There you go. So he's using the word soul, even though what's really discussed is the degrees of the self, the nafs, in our nomenclature. And this is a good, reliable translation. And the levels that I'm going to talk about this evening, you can also read more about them. I brought the Arabic and the English for you to see afterwards. The first level of the self is a nafs al-ammara bisu, the inciting soul, the soul that calls to bad action. After that is a nafs al-lawama, the reproachable or blameworthy self. After that comes a nafs al-mulhama, the inspired self. And then number 4 is a nafs al-radiyah, the serene self. Number 5 is a nafs al-mardiyah, the contented self. Number 6 is a nafs al-mutma'inna, the self found pleasing. And all of these, by the way, are taken from verses in the Quran. This is not ijtihad or anything. And then number 7, as to be expected, is the complete self, an-nafs al-kamila. Now, again, some of the ulama, they say there's really only 3. Some of them, they don't count the first one. And then they say the other ones, the differences are so narrow, there's really only 3 after that. That's fine. It's all trying to articulate the same phenomena. I'm giving you an academic understanding in its fullest form. So you have these, you've at least heard it, you kind of understand where to place it. But if you read that somebody says, there's only 2 kinds or 3 kinds, you understand that that's fine, there's no problem, because it's not an exact science. Or the demarcations are not necessarily exact, is what I mean. Now, all of these types of the self that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about, the ulama of this science observed the different characteristics of different people that manifest with these different types of nafs. So they will talk about the general description of a person that has this kind of nafs. And again, as we said in the very beginning, that our religion is based on Quran and Sunnah, but also on how we understand the Quran and Sunnah in time through the world around us, our experience with it. This experience part is very important for this part of our discussion. Because as the ulama sought to describe these things, they described generally what they found, generally what they saw. And that is why some people will say, well, we really shouldn't count the first one. We don't need to count the last one because an-nafs al-kamila is not necessarily verbatim in the Quran. The other ones, maybe we can lump 2 together, so there's 3. And that's why they have different ways, different ijtihad of explaining the different levels of the self. Now, I said a while ago, a few minutes ago, that the goal of our spiritual life is to increase in our level of ourself as much as possible. Allah Ta'ala says that in the Quran. It is mentioned that this is one of the the goals of the Prophet, yuzakihim. Yuzakihim in the Quran is it's not just teaching them Quran and Sunnah, but Allah Ta'ala says, and yuzakihim, that you purify them. Now you know what that verse means. When Abraham alayhi salam makes dua that Allah will send a messenger after him, meaning a reference to Sayyidina Muhammad alayhi salam, to teach them the book of Allah and hikmah and wisdom, wa yuzakihim. Now you know what that means. What does that mean, yuzakihim? To purify them. This is exactly what we're talking about. All approaches to Islamic spirituality, all approaches to tasawwuf, it doesn't matter what the name of the order is, at its heart is this transaction, is increasing your level of your nafs. It might not be explicitly stated the way I just stated it. There might be difference of understanding of how many levels there are and things like that. But the main goal for us to purify ourselves is that we don't end up being the lowest version of ourselves, that we can be the best version of ourselves. One of the reasons this is important to know is that what we just said the last few minutes about these different levels of the self, that, and I don't want to get into the details, you could read about it if you're interested, but the descriptions of these levels, what's important about that is that helps us understand and reconcile other things that people outside of the paradigm of Islam have found about human behavior. So a lot of what we find, for example, written about in modern psychology, from the time of Freud till now, we don't necessarily have to disagree with that. But we would say all of that is all good and well and very informative, but in our language, you are talking about a nafs al-ammara bis-su'. You're talking about the nafs that calls to bad actions. But we know that there can be better levels of that, of yourself. Have you ever done something and felt bad? We've all done that. That's a nafs al-lawwama. Have you ever done something and not, cared at all, God forbid, or somebody who's like that? Well, that's a nafs al-ammara. And nafs al-ammara. Ammara means constantly ordering you to do something bad. Not once, not an amir, this al-ammara, fa'al, all the time. I've met people like that. They love to do the wrong thing. They boast about doing the wrong thing. They talk about getting away with the wrong thing, and it brings them like joy, and they get excited. But I know that you could be better than that. What's one step better than that? Feel bad about what you've done. The blameworthy self, in the nafs al-lawwama. Have you ever met somebody who just seems inspired, very wise, content, peaceful, and you thought to yourself, how can I be like that? Or why can't I be like that? Etc. You can. It's not that that person is maybe that person is special in the sense that Allah has blessed them with that, but it doesn't mean that it's exclusive to that person. You can be like that too. You can overcome that shortcoming. So one of the benefits of understanding, for lack of a better word, our Islamic psychology is that we can, as I said, just stated a while ago, just to reiterate, is that we can understand and reconcile what the dominant culture has deduced and understood with our own paradigm. And we can add to that. Hopefully one day we can add to that and say, but there's a better way of living. There's an advantage to suppressing some of these lower desires. There's an advantage to suppressing some of these lower behavioral activities. Because if you do that, if you close this door, then something else will open, and you can be illuminated, and you can be more inspired, and you can be more calm, and you can overcome those shortcomings, so on and so forth. Now, there's another topic to mention when we talk about the levels of the self. Now, what do we do with the levels of the self? We'll talk about that next lecture, inshallah. But the ulama, again, who observed this, and who thought, by the way, the two groups that really spent a lot of time talking about this stuff are the Naqshbandis and the Khalwatis, which are two very well-known Sufi orders. So the early Naqshbandis and the Khalwatis, like this book, for example, is a translation of Sheikh Abdul Khaliq al-Shabrawi, rahimahullah. He was a saintly Egyptian Khalwati. As I said, the early Naqshbandis. Again, it's not exclusive to those approaches or to those schools of tazkiyah, but they are the ones that we've inherited from them, a lot of the scheme. The other thing that they noticed is that we said the job is to increase, the job is to better yourself. So in that journey of bettering yourself, the people that observe that, they observe that there's a physical sensation almost, or there's a physical experience as person goes from nafs to nafs. And when they observe this, they say in the, around your chest area where your physical heart is, there are these 5 things that they call al-lata'if al-khamsa, the 5 subtle things. And that these 5 subtle things, it's almost like in a manual car, to shift from gear to gear. For those of you that still remember how to do this, you have to hit the clutch. The clutch is that 3rd pedal on the left, right? You have to hit the clutch and then move the gear shift. I mean, that's how I learned to drive on manual stick. So I use that, maybe I date myself. You hit the clutch and then you move it. That clutch are these 5 points. I mean, it's not the best example, but you kind of get the idea. Is to move from level to level, you're going to feel a sensation. And some of the books are so specific, they'll say it's exactly 2 fingers length below your actual heart, and it's 3 fingers length to the right of that. Anyway, what are these 5 things? At least you've heard it once. The first is called al-qalb, which is the heart in Arabic. The second one is a ruh, which is the soul in Arabic. So this is why you need to have this academic understanding so you don't get confused. The third is called the secret, as-sir. The fourth is called al-khafay, the hidden. And number 5 is al-akhfa, the more hidden. So these 5 subtle areas in the mid-chest region, they found that when somebody is about to leave one level of this nafs and go to another level, and it doesn't necessarily happen like in an instant, but it's like a process. And that process is the process of dhikr, is the process of invocation, is the process of contemplation. We'll talk about that next couple lectures. As they are doing that, not everybody, but some people will feel a sensation of coolness somewhere inside them. And there is some hadith evidence. I mean, the hadith are weak. I don't want to get into that about the Isra and the Mi'raj and the Prophet feeling a coolness in his chest. We don't have to get into, but it's real. It's something that's based on the Quran and Sunnah. Is my point. It's not something that's sort of you really lost us. No, this is Quran and Sunnah, because there's this physical manifestation for somebody that's making dhikr. There's a physical manifestation for somebody that takes the Quran and Sunnah and acts it. Something's gonna change in you. Why else would you do it if you didn't think it's gonna change you? So these lata'if, these subtle things, in physical things, are also mentioned when we talk about the levels of the nafs. And all of this goes to show us the extent of the detail that the ulama gave to understanding and articulating all of this. When you read some of these descriptions, it's really phenomenal that people sat there and observed, almost they're like physicians conducting an experiment and observing this medicine works or this medicine works. It's quite phenomenal. Anyway, I think that's enough for today. Before I lose you guys anymore. So we talked about body, and what that means, soul, not much to say, it's the battery, and the nafs, the self. The self is what we're very concerned is, that's in each one of us. It is the rational thinking part of us. It can be really bad, or it can be really good, which explains why there's good people and bad people in the world. But we're all humans, we're all the same body and soul, we have a nafs. And the job of the Muslim is to make that, to polish that nafs. That is one of the reasons why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the prophets have been sent to humanity, is to teach them how to do this. So there's nothing that is more based on the Quran and Sunnah than what we're talking about. This is really to fulfill our obligations as believers of this faith tradition. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam wa a'lam. Any questions? Yeah.
So the next, as it transitions from level to level, how often does that happen? Because like in psychology, you're really not supposed to label a person or they'll become that next or whatever that next or whatever description you want to give to that person. Is it the way that you speak of it, it almost seems like that's a label that goes with that human in an almost permanent state a description of that person.
No. Again, remember, I'm just talking about it academically. So things have to be 1, 2, 3, up to 10. Very simple. But in real life, no, it's not. It's messier than that. And the other part, which wasn't able to stuff it in this lecture, is that there are veils between us and Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. So there are veils that prevent our spiritual advancement, and those veils will be different for each person. Sometimes younger people, it's easier for them because they have less, I guess the modern word is baggage. Or it can be more difficult for them because it's just too complex for them to understand. They just want to live life. Women, for example, in the modern age, tend to be better at this than men, because women, our experience, and our mashayikh teach us that their experience as well, is that women are so inherent, sacrifice is so inherent for them because of the children and raising the children, that the idea of letting go of something that you want to do because of something, another reason, comes like secondhand. So women tend to advance more than men. So it's nisbi. It's not like set in stone. You can go through these stages quickly. It can happen like overnight. Probably not, but it could, and it has in the past. Some people really, really struggle for a long time, and then they just break it, and it just breaks, and they go boom, boom, boom. So it tends to be a subtle progression to do this type of deep work. And that deep work is, you have some kind of dhikr that you're doing, some kind of invocation that helps you, because each of these levels of the self, as we will come to see, there is a certain type of invocation that works to addressing and fixing the problems of that level that helps the person move to the next level. There's also, we have to assess our own life. How are we with our prayer? How are we with our fasting? How are we with our zakah? The kind of things that Imam al-Ghazali writes about in the Ihya al-Madin. Where are we vis-a-vis our backbiting? And you're not going to get anywhere if you're backbiting. You can do all the dhikr you want, but if you're lying, stealing, and cheating, it's not going to add up. Like the Prophet ﷺ said, somebody will fast all day, but they curse this person, they curse that person. At the end of the day, all they got is that they were hungry and thirsty. So they fasted, yeah, technically, but they didn't get anything out of the fast. So we're complicated, which is why you need somebody to guide you through all of this. And we'll get to all of that, but it's not. I'm just trying to present it in a simple, academic lecture way. Yeah.
So I'm curious because a lot of what you were saying relates more to the mind, but yet the focus seems to be on the heart. And when you decide between different actions, it's your mind, it's not necessarily your heart. Just curious.
Yes, so for us, they are one and the same. So our heart is the organ of intellection. I mean, what we call in the Islamic discourse the heart. I don't mean the actual, I know it's in the mind. But remember the mind, even you pointing to your head, you said the mind, I would retort and say, well, you're referring to the mass, to the body. That's not what Allah Ta'ala is referring to when He addresses the human being. He's addressing our spiritual heart. Sometimes we even say our spiritual heart. So when Allah says, are they not reflecting on the Quran, or are there locks on their heart? He's not talking about the organ, the heart, or the organ, the brain. He is talking about the self that He has given us, that has given us an advantage over all other creation, that we are free to think and to deduce and to act or not act. So again, it can get confusing because they're the same words, but in this environment, they'll have slightly different meanings.
Where do you place fitra, instinct? Is it part of the self? Is it another dimension?
Fitra is how we are before the world messes us up. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ said everybody is born on the fitra, and then their parents they make them the Majus, they make them the Christian. So the fitra is Allah has created us with body, soul, and self, and has created within us the deep knowledge that Allah Ta'ala exists. That's essentially what the fitra is. It's like a natural idea. It's as natural as What goes up must come down. I mean, it's just natural. Fire burns, the ice is cold. It's natural. La ilaha illallah. But then as we get older, and the world around us and the environment around it imprints on us certain understandings and biases, then we start to change. So we have to call it things. So we can't call him God. We have to say the supreme force of the universe or something like that. Because if you say the word God, people, they think, were any of you at the Thanksgiving thing last weekend at the Presbyterian Church? Yeah. You remember when the priest said, if you look from the sky at the church, and he said God's perspective? You know, I was like, I mean, that's like the word. So God is in the heavens, sitting on a chair, looking down at your church through the Google GPS. I mean, that's ridiculous. God can't be in the heavens, nor can he be under the chair, or any of that nonsense. That's why we began the way we began. He even said that. So when people say God in this culture, they think he's just like a big superhuman with a big beard. This is bigger than our beard, etc. You know, astaghfirullah, hasha lillah. So that's what fitra is. It's just naturally we're like that, but then the impression of the dunya on us makes us have to, change.
Primitive states, basically.
Now,
It's a primitive state.
primordial, not primitive.
Primate.
Primitive is a pejorative
It's
word.
pejorative.
Sayyid Hussein Nasr would translate it as the primordial state of man. Now, yeah.
There is another element mentioned, which is fu'ad. Where does fu'ad?
Fu'ad is just another word for heart. So in Arabic, there are many words for heart. Al-lub, al-qalb, al-fu'ad, etc. So,
however, what I learned is in the fu'ad there is some precision as far as the choice.
yeah, so I was just trying to remember the book. But one of the ulama wrote a book specifically about this issue. It's a very small book, talking about the different meanings, the different words for heart in the Quran and what they mean in that instance. So from a general point of view, there are different words for the same thing. But every item in Arabic that has multiple names, those multiple names mean something different. Like the names of the Prophet, Muhammad and Ahmad refer to the Prophet, but they mean different things. Al-Mahi, Al-Hashir, Bil-Mu'minina Ra'ufun Rahim, Al-Mustafa, Taha, Yasin, they all refer to the same Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But they all in their names mean something different. But I don't know more than that right now. I have to, yeah.
Where do those who have intellectual disabilities fit into this framework, whether they were born with them or whether over time they diminished?
Intellectual?
Yeah.
It goes back to the issue of moral responsibility, taklif. So if somebody is born without all of their senses, for example, blind and deaf, like Helen Keller, in the Sharia, she is not morally responsible. Even though she got an advanced degree and then she wrote and she did all of these things, but she is not going to be held accountable for her actions, and she will be saved Yawm al-Qiyamah. Why? Because a huge part of moral responsibility is you have to be able to understand what green is and what black is and what yellow is. And you have to be able to see, the Mus'haf, for example, you can't just know them intellectually. But like we said about physical substance and the accidents, you have to be able to experience them. So if somebody has deficiency in their intellectual capacity to the point that takes them outside of moral responsibility, then they're saved. They're outside all of this. In many ways, they're more natural than we are. We need all of this because we know that we can get ourselves in trouble, and we do get ourselves in trouble. But people that are not morally responsible in that way, the way that you stated, are not only saved, but in many ways closer to the fitrah, the way that Allah has created them. That's how we should look at it. Now, there are some people that are saved because they didn't get the message, even though they made a mess in this dunya. They're not like that. What you're talking about is, something else. Those people more pure. The ulama, they say, for example, have you ever seen anyone like what you described? Have you ever seen anyone like that steal or cheat or hurt somebody? No, we're the ones that do that. So in many ways, they're protected. Allah is protected. That's what a saint is. A saint is somebody that's protected. Their actions are protected. They're not going to lie. They're not going to hurt. They're not going to steal. So we are the ones that are in need of assistance and help, not them, from the moral point of view. Did somebody else have something? Yeah. Why are you hiding in the dark?
Your light is enough.
Oh, to be taught. To be taught.
This might seem like a pessimistic question, and it's a beautiful topic. I don't mean to sound pessimistic, but are there instances that have been observed by the Mashaykh where somebody can like progress and then like go down?
Yeah, Imam al-Junayd was asked, Ayazni al-Wali, will the saint commit zina? And he said, Inna amra Allahi kana qadran maqdura. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's command is qadr. If it happens, it happens. So there's no isma, there's no infallibility after the Prophet. Now, when you say this, people they don't understand what this means. So maybe we should explain it so people don't think like I'm saying the saint is going to go like commit crime. You know, the saintly person most likely will not commit those things, or else they wouldn't be a saint. But when Imam al-Junayd was asked that, radiallahu anhu, his point was that nothing is out of the realm of possibility. If Allah has given something, He can take it away. But the way we prevent that from happening is learning about the rules and learning about the parameters. So, Abdul Qadir al-Jilani was in his khalwa worshipping, or maybe it was Imam al-Junayd. Anyway, story is, and he heard a voice. Ya Abdul Qadir, Labbaik. He says, we hear your voice. And he goes, Labbaik. And we love you. He says, and I love you. And he thinks that he's conversing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says, we love you so much that we have removed from you the necessity to follow any of the Sharia. And then he said, Itla, and right away he said, get away, you cursed one. And it vanished. And then he smelled this really bad smell. And then Shaitan said to him, Wallahi, we have removed 70 people from sainthood from this perspective. So he knows that there's no such thing that you're so pure you don't have to pray anymore. Or you're so pure you don't have to fast. That's ridiculous. So he knows that rationally. And the reason we have to have these rules and we have to have these discussions and we have to have these classes is so we don't fall prey to the mistakes. But the short answer to your question is, of course, somebody can advance and somebody can decrease. The Prophet said, everyone sins, but the best of sinners are those that constantly turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So our job is to, if we fall, to stand up, ask for forgiveness, and to move forward. Allah will protect us, inshallah. Allah is merciful. He has no need to do that to us. He doesn't need to. So, inshallah, Allah is generous. Yeah.
What you just said, does that relate to the non-Iman increasing?
Yes, of course, Iman increases. قالت الأعراب آمنا. The Arabs that became Muslim, they told the Prophet, we believe in the Quran. قل لا تؤمنوا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا ولما يدخل الإيمان في قلوبكم. No, don't say you have become believers. Say you have become Muslims because belief has not entered into your hearts yet. So the Iman is a stage beyond Islam. Islam is just like, the formalities. But Iman that comes in the faith, it can increase and it can decrease. And one of the du'as that the Prophet constantly invoked is, Ya Allah, make my, Ya Muthabbit al-Qulub, all the one who makes the heart firm, make my heart firm on your faith, on your religion. So the faith can increase and can decrease without doubt.
I think the same thing, though. What you said about the self and different states or levels.
Yes.
Interchangeable.
Yes, you can think, for these purposes, you can think of them as interchangeable. Yes. Which is why it's a process. But at a certain point in the process, you are carried not by your own actions. So your faith is firm and not shaky. And that's one of the descriptions of some of the later levels of the self. So people that have, faith that comes and goes, that they're going to be on the lower end of that spectrum. When you advance, one of the signs of that advancement is that, prayer is not difficult for you. My whole life, it's so difficult to wake up for Fajr. Or my whole life, it's so difficult to pray Dhuhr because I'm at work or something like that. And then all of a sudden, it becomes easy. I wake up every day for Fajr. Every day I find myself going to make wudu right when the adhan is coming, just like, so people will say stuff like that. It's the same person, but their faith becomes firm. And then after it becomes firm, it increases. So the smallest amount of action will make their faith increase. Whereas before, that same person, but maybe at a lower level, they could, do all of these things and read all this Quran and do all of these spiritual actions, and their faith, just like an inch moves forward. So some of these are, I'm just being simplistic, but some of these are the descriptions of the different levels. So yes, it can happen, but inshallah, you get to a point where it just becomes firm. And that's the true sign of a saintly person. What is a saint? The awliya in the Quran. A saint is somebody who is consistent with their practice. Consistency is the greatest sign of sainthood. It's not that you can fly, it's not that, I snap my fingers and there's like a big basket of fruit. And that, as a matter of fact, one of the things that we'll learn is those type of miracles that we read about, those happen to weak people that need those miracles to make their heart firm. But the big saints, like the big giants of Islam, they didn't have these type of miracles because they were already firm. What is the sign that what is the goal that we hope for, we pray for, is just to be consistent. I pray all the time. I fast every Ramadan. I read Quran every day. And that's what the Prophet says, خَيْرُ الْأَعْمَالِ أَدْوَمُهَا وَإِنْ. The best of actions are those that are consistent, even if it's a little bit. That consistency only comes when Allah Ta'ala is protecting you. Like this weekend, that's it. I'm going to go on a diet, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to run 5 miles. Then Monday comes and you're back to eating pizza. You didn't go to the gym, you slept in and stuff like that. We're like that, we're weak. But the person that's consistent all the time, you can't plan that. That means something else is in control.
Where we fit in when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said,
Well, Allah says what? Yeah, Radiya, Mardiya. Those are two levels. Which where they come from. Mutma'inna, Radiya, Mardiya. All 3 in one verse. It's a sale. 3 in 1. So different levels. This is where the ulama got it from. So they said, whoa, slow down. So what do you mean, Radiya, Mutma'inna? What does that mean? So they start to observe, generation after generation, and this is how they articulate. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's ijtihad involved. Because when you read, like if you read this book and you read some of the later levels, it kind of all sounds the same. But there are certain differences. How do we know there are differences? Because Allah in this verse mentions them in Surah Al-Fajr. Ya ayatuha nafsul mutma'inna, irji'i ila rabbika radiya mardiya. Irji'i, come back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one of the signs that the person is always going back, from the point of view of their heart, they're always turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the person is content in the relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the person doesn't see anything except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what they call al-fana, to be annihilated. When the self is annihilated in the language of tasawwuf, it means that you don't see anything except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then there's baqa, then you remain like that. And that's where that consistency comes from. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give it to us, inshallah.
You mentioned how the iman can increase and decrease. Is that when iman weakens, is that considered sinful? It's something you can make tawbah for?
No, it's human. It's human. So the Sahaba, that they complained to the Prophet with the same thing. They said, when we're with you, we're in the zone. But then when we go home and we interact with our wives and our children, it's like we forget everything. So they thought that was a sign that they had become hypocrites. So the Prophet ﷺ, he laughed, he smiled, and said, no, there's a time for this and there's a time for that. Because if you were always with me, if you were always in the zone, I mean, obviously the Prophet ﷺ didn't say zone in the hadith, but that's my name. He's saying if you're always in that zone, then you would see the angels and you would shake hands with the angels. Now, when people read that hadith, they're like, oh, mashallah, Allah. But imagine if all we did is we just saw angels all the time. We would be crazy. We wouldn't do anything. We would never clean the mosque. We would never clean ourselves. We would just be walking around and we're seeing all of the angels that are all around us. We would be useless to our fellow man, our fellow woman. So the Prophet ﷺ is not saying that that's necessarily a good thing. He's saying that it's from Allah's mercy on you that there's a day like this, an hour like this, and an hour like that. But yeah, we feel bad. Who wants their faith to go down? We don't like it. We don't feel good when we feel low. But the fact that you feel bad is a good sign because it means that you're alive. If we didn't feel bad that we had low faith and we didn't even care about it, it'd be even more of a crisis. So the fact that we're aware of our own deficiency is a good sign, a very good sign.
Question: you mentioned angel. In Islam, is there a formalization or canonization to look back?
No, we don't have a canonization in that sense, but we have a communal understanding that so and so was like a saint. Like no two Muslims are going to disagree that Imam al-Ghazali was a saintly person, or no two people are going to disagree that Imam Abu Hanifa was a saintly person. So we have this concept that the Ummah has accepted them in total. That we have that phrase, and that like Imam al-Bukhari, there's no doubt that guy was a saint. I mean, he prayed 2 rak'ahs. He made wudu and prayed 2 rak'ahs every time he put a hadith in his book. Just the number of prayers that he had, if you count the hadith, are more than what we're praying outside of the fard prayers. So there's no doubt that he was a saintly person, but there's no like canonization in that sense.
Like we don't dig them up and like I mean, I've heard stories about, right, like in terms of some Christian traditions where they have this whole process and then like they have to sometimes they have to dig up the bones. And
oh really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
No, that's
like for some. I mean, maybe this is like not true, but then I heard like for some people they believe that saints don't disintegrate, or there's some issue with
Us or the Christians?
Okay, don't quote me on this, but that's what I'm saying that I heard. I don't know whether that's true or not, but there's some people that believe that saintly people their bodies have a different sort of composition, or they have there's something different about them physically.
Yeah.
And then you can find out later on by doing certain tests and things.
Dig up?
I mean, by all means, but I don't know if that's going to prove it.
Yeah, so there's a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah has forbidden the earth from decomposing the bodies of the prophets. So that's an article of belief. And there are some saintly people that has been found to be true after they died, but not from the point of view that we have to go through this official process of canonization by accident. There was like a flood and like the grave like came up, or the mosque was crushed or something, or they have to pave a road somewhere. So by accident they found this grave and they found somebody. So that's how we've inherited those stories. Not that we don't bury it. It's haram. You can't go bury someone and go dig them up again. That's like really bad. Over the course of centuries, the grave marker is lost. So you forget that somebody is buried here. So you go to bury somebody and you dig and you find that there's somebody there and their body's intact. And then you ask around and you realize, oh, this was like the body of some, alim or saint or something like that. So that happens, and it can happen, and I've read about it and things like that. But it's not like it's not like a sign of anything. Because Allah allows it or He doesn't allow it. We don't have anything to do with it. But the saintly person is the person that we agree is, that's a person that lived an upright life, that embodied the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, that taught us our faith. Their books and their students, continue to guide us. So we accept, the community accepts that this person is a saintly person. At the same, there's no litmus test. At the same time, the reason there's no litmus test is one of the things that Allah has hidden amongst the creation is He has hidden the saint amongst us. So we don't know who amongst us is a saint. It's not always the guy sitting on the chair with the big beard and the big turban. It's not like that. It could be the guy that's, outside working the fields, the farmer, the laborer, or whatever. Because sainthood is not a litmus test. It's something that's on the inside. Like Allah has hidden Laylatul Qadr in the nights of Ramadan, like Allah has hidden the accepted dua amongst all our dua, like Allah has hidden our accepted actions amongst all of our actions, so has Allah hidden the saint amongst all of creation. Might not even be Muslim. But you don't know what this person is going to do in their life. Which is why one of the things that we learn is never to just be disrespectful to somebody, never to pass judgment to somebody, no matter who they are, because you don't know if that person is a saint or not. And my experience is that usually saintly people go out of their way to hide that from the rest of the community. So they're not like verified on Instagram, saint. I have a new category, I'm a saint. No, it's not like that. It's actually quite the opposite. And you really don't find out about them until after they pass.
But you may never find out about them if they're sort of hidden.
Yeah, you might not ever find out. That's true. That's very true. Yeah, you might not know. That's absolutely true. Only Allah Ta'ala knows. And all of the people now that we think are saintly people, they might not be saintly people. Because it's not about, it's exactly for the opposite reason of what you said. There is no litmus test. Only Allah really knows what's in our heart and how we, you can present one thing to the world. Who is the first person that is thrown into hellfire? What would you think if I asked you who's the first person that's thrown into the hellfire?
Sure.
No? The first person that's thrown into the hellfire is an alim who taught people Islam night and day, but he only taught people Islam so that it would be said that he was a learned person. And then after that, it's a hafiz. Somebody who learned the Quran, memorized the Quran, taught the Quran, but he only did that or she only did that so that people would say they are a hafiz. And then the third person is a wealthy person that donated all the money for all of the good works in the Muslim community, but they only did that because they wanted it to be said they were a generous person. Sahih hadith. So that's not what we unless I knew that hadith, I would have answered like you, or shaitan or something like that. But it's not. So we don't know. We don't know. And this is a reminder that we're all in the same struggle together. All in the same struggle. There's no litmus test.
So the rule,
Last one, because Azan time.
so the rule of thumb is that it's Allah who decides the value of someone's actions.
The what?
It's God who decides the value of someone's actions.
Yeah, what Allah wants is our pure action that is only done for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What?
It's only He who can judge.
Allah can judge because it's based on our intention and what's deep down inside us. It's not based on what we see in the dunya. We can all donate $1 right now to the mosque. But there might be people amongst us that $1 is a stretch for them. That $1 that's a stretch for somebody is worth infinitely more than the person who has hundreds or thousands of dollars and donates $1. Even though from our dunya perspective, it's the same buck. But from the perspective of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not. The Prophet said, Khairul a'mal jahdul muqil. The best of actions is to give when you can't give. And he called it jahd from the same word as jihad. It's a jihad. You only have $10 in your pocket and you put down $5, that's like half of what you had in your pocket. So the measuring apparatus that Allah Ta'ala has is different. Allah Ta'ala will bring a man Yawm al-Qiyamah and there's not a last thing. And then there's not a sin that this man did not commit. And he's piling the sin, he's piling the sin, he's piling the sin on the scale. And there's nothing on the good scale. And then the man is given up hope. He's stressed out that he's going to be cast into the hellfire. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, oh, you have one thing that's good. And he takes out like a little card. And the man says, what is this little card going to do? Allah ta'ala puts it on the scale and it outweighs all of the bad deeds. So the man says, what is written on this paper? What is the one thing that I did is good? Allah ta'ala says, one time, with pure intention, you said from your heart, La ilaha illallah. That's it. So it's not by even Yawm al-Qiyamah, it's not on what we think. It's based on Allah Ta'ala's mercy upon upon us. May He, inshallah, forgive us and shower us with His mercy. Allah Ta'ala. Who's gonna get that then? Oh, it's a batuta.